It's 7:45 on a Saturday evening in a fairly cold Johannesburg. A huge welcome to everyone. Lovely to have you joining us around the world. And Herschel Jarvis, let's turn on your camera. Have you been as cold as I've been over this past week?
How are you? Probably a little colder. I'm just on the right side of the body max index. So I've been water bottling, bean bagging, petering the whole week. It's really been a cold week.
Well, what you lack in body fat, I have double of. And I can tell you, I've still frozen. So welcome to Robi and Bassam. Great to have you guys joining us this evening.
Hi, thank you.
Let's test your sound. You've joined us in a fairly cold Johannesburg this evening, but I imagine it's relatively warm on your side of the world.
Very cold, you say?
Well, by South African standards, very cold. And we say what we say every year at this time. We say it's never been this cold in Johannesburg before.
Wow, we live in an oven.
But
we live in Jericho, so it's very hot. Yes. I want to open this. There we go.
Okay, are you open? So, Bassam, you're in Jericho. What was the temperature today?
Maybe 40, 42, 43.
I would gladly swap that for Johannesburg.
No, you wouldn't.
And Robi, where in the world do you join us from?
I live in Jaffa.
In Jaffa, okay. And I imagine on your side of the world, COVID is no longer an issue. Certainly, Robi, your side definitely not an issue. But is COVID still an issue in Jericho?
Especially in Jericho, not an issue, but in general, there are it's not the main issue now. So we can see less and less, especially with the new vaccinations.
So on our side of the world, Herschel and I were just comparing some of the results of today's, because
you know what, Howard, your sound is not all that great, by the way.
Okay, Herschel, can you also not hear me? Or
no, I think
it's not very, or maybe it's your South African accent that I don't understand.
Robi, we're going to talk about your South African accent soon.
I know.
But Herschel and I were just comparing the figures which have just come out for today on the new positive cases in South Africa. And we had 9,000.
Now that was better. When you move your head to the side there, it's better.
Okay, I'll try. Is that okay?
Yes, you need to hold that when you talk.
Maybe,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've just had 9,320 new cases today, and that's a 71% jump on last week Saturday. We're now in our third wave. Of all the tests done on people in the last 24 hours, 16.6% came back positive.
Wow.
Are these, but there's not enough vaccinations in South Africa.
We're still in the very early stages of our vaccinations. We have less than 2% of the population vaccinated. And in fact, a big blow happened yesterday when the FDA in America decided that Johnson & Johnson batches were in fact contaminated. And we were relying, there are millions and millions of Johnson & Johnson vaccines waiting for us in South Africa, but we're not sure, in fact, if they were contaminated in the United States, in Baltimore. So we may have to discard all of those. So it hasn't been a good few days for COVID in South Africa. So if you guys pray at all, put in a good prayer for us. We're cold. We're having rolling blackouts of electricity, about 4 to 5 hours a day of no electricity, and we have a lack of vaccine. So
it's a bit like Gaza. Maybe I'm just going to take my cat and put it out of the room. Otherwise, we'll walk past. It does every Zoom that I have. The cat does. You know, in Hitchcock films, Hitchcock always appears for a cameo.
Yes.
So Sylvia Plath, the cat. That's what she does. So she just said goodbye.
Ah, and what's the cat's name?
Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath.
It sounds a bit like something out of a Dr. Zeus. Sylvia Plath.
Sylvia Plath was a very famous writer and poet, but she was on probation, but now I guess she's staying. The problem is she hates everybody except me, which is a bit problematic.
I think, Robbie, when it comes to cats, I think the cat's view is that probably the cat thought you were on probation and that you're staying. I think that's how cats work.
And the maddest thing is that I live on the first floor, so it's quite high up. It's called the second floor. A cat jumped into the building, into my house last night, ate up Sylvia Plath's dinner, and then I found it sleeping under my couch this morning like it was moving in. So I had to tell it, I'm sorry, you'll have to move out. And but it's just weird because I got it in the height of COVID. So I didn't know anybody. That's why it hates everybody, especially my son, Aaron.
So Robbie, let's talk about your accent. Clearly a South African accent. Give us a little bit of, we'll cover it when we begin at 8 o'clock, but like we have a few hundred people watching us already, as people coming into the room, watching us on Zoom, watching us on YouTube, watching us on Facebook, because we broadcast on all of those channels. But give us your South African connections. Who would we know that's family in South Africa?
My family's name was Masons.
So you were related to Izzy?
Izzy was my father's brother. Yes.
Okay, and in fact, in the documentary, you go see Helen Maisels-Trisk.
Yes.
Okay, so very illustrious, Bassam. I don't know if you know just how illustrious Robbie's family is, but Robbie's uncle was one of the most famous lawyers ever in South Africa, and he defended the treason trialists, the ANC treason trialists. There was a big treason trial in the early 1960s, or was it 1959, 1960, somewhere around there, and he led the defense of all the treason trialists in that trial. And there are buildings in Johannesburg named after Izzy Maisels. I had the privilege of meeting him when he was very much into his 80s. As a young lawyer, we went to consult with him, and I'd taken months. I had done boxes and boxes of files, and like there were literally thousands of documents in them. And we're sitting in the consultation, and someone mentioned something, and he says, "Your figure you mentioned is wrong." And everyone looks at him. He says, "No, it's not." He says, "The third box of files, file number 5, if you take it out, number 16 in the index, page 23. Wow. And I go to all of these documents, and I go to box number 3, I take out file number 4, I go to the tab 23, I open up page 4, and there is the figure that the guy quoted incorrectly. And he had, well into his 80s, he had memorized that.
Well, let's hope I also retain my marbles.
Howard, I think if I remember correctly, all of the trialists in that specific trial were acquitted, and he was lead defense counsel.
There's a wonderful picture of them carrying him up on their shoulders. But he came to Israel and he introduced me to Ben Gurion. We went to Ben Gurion's house one morning, and Ben Gurion hardly spoke to him. He only spoke to me because I was a new immigrant. And he thought that was such a nice thing to be. So he was a character, Izzy. I mean, if he didn't like you, God help you. You know?
And because of
pretend that he was deaf.
Because of Robi's uncle, I appreciate the South African Jews, all of them.
So in fact,
I know the story.
He used to pretend that he was deaf. You know, he used to go to court and make the witness say things over and over and say, "What? You know, I don't hear you." And he was an amazing cross-examiner.
You know, amongst the people who stood trial, there were Esther Basel, who had been arrested originally. They had taken names at something called the Congress of the People, where the Freedom Charter was in fact drafted. And everyone who was there, and there were vast numbers of South African Jews who were there, they were very much involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And everyone whose name they took at the signing of the Freedom Charter was later charged with treason at the treason trial. But there was no real evidence. They were patriots fighting for freedom. And luckily they had an amazing defense team. And then when Nelson Mandela and the Rivonia trial stood trial a year or two later, in fact, that defense was someone called George Bezos, Greek member of the South African
very
community.
good counsel, though. He was.
And
the persecutor was the prosecutor.
Yeah, but also the defense was someone called Sidney Kentridge, who we gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to last year. He's 96 years old, living in London now, Sir Sidney Kentridge. He was head of the South African Bar and one of the greatest legal minds to have ever come out of South Africa as well. So we have lots of history relating to these things.
Yeah, but my mother's family were Alexander, and that was very different. Those were German Jews. They didn't come from Lithuania. And they had Alexander Brothers, which was a huge legal firm a very long time ago, of course.
And of course, there was Ray Alexander, also an anti-apartheid activist. I don't know if that was a schism of your family.
But I've got more yichus, because my distant cousin called Herman Kallenbach walked with Gandhi from Pietermaritzburg to Johannesburg. So what did you want?
Not only did he walk with Gandhi, he gave him his farm. He was a very famous South African architect. He and Gandhi lived together in the house next to what is now Pine Street Shul, Pine Street Synagogue in Johannesburg, and it is now a Gandhi museum. And the amazing stories of the two of them together, and many of the letters that they wrote to each other. They were both prolific letter writings. So
he's a crazy guy, Herman Kallenbach. You know, after the First World War, when they disbanded the African something or other in North Africa, disbanded a unit of camels, and nobody wanted the camels, so he bought the camels. And he brought them home to his house in Houghton. How they got there is beyond me, but they moved into Houghton. Imagine how thrilled his neighbors were to have camels in the garden. So he was quite a character.
So, Bassam, I don't know if the term means anything to you, but when we do this, we call it Jewish geography, where we try to fit all the pieces together. I don't know if there's Palestinian geography as well. Does the same thing happen?
It's a mirror image. Exactly.
So can we find you some South African connections?
Maybe.
Tonight's the night. I hope of the people watching us that Sunday someone says that's my family in Jericho.
Hold on, he can tell you about his very small amount of brothers and sisters.
How many, Bassam?
Only 16.
No way.
Yeah.
How many brothers, how many sisters in the 16?
Half, and I am in the middle. And maybe we will lose 6 or 7 brothers and sisters also.
Wow. And
so today, I believe our family, we can occupy Johannesburg.
Bassam, take us to a family gathering. Does the family get together?
Never.
Just too many people.
For example, in Ramadan, we make iftar, but never in one place.
Okay.
So we make a few days.
But if you count from your parents, how many descendants, children, grandchildren, great whatever, how many would that be? Any idea?
More than 300 more.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes iftar dinner quite difficult and quite expensive.
Very.
So for the people watching us this evening, we're going to go live in about 1 minute time. But if you're watching us from around the world, we'd love to know where in the world you're watching us from. Herschel, we haven't had a webinar in just over a week, and we've got so many people saying, why did you take a week off? But the last webinar we did was on sleep. We had about 7,000 people watching us on a webinar about sleep and about 160 questions asked. So have you had a good night's sleep since then, Hirsch?
I think so, Howie, and it's the only advantage of winter. You know, there's something about getting into bed with a warm blanket and a hot water bath, or trying to manage those electricity bills in South Africa. So a warm blanket and a hot water bath in winter is one of the good things about being in the cold.
Shall I give you a wonderful tip for all your people who are watching? I see there are 326 participants.
That's
So-
on Zoom, but of course we've got
That's on
another
Zoom
few
and
hundred on YouTube, and another few hundred on Facebook, and like everything. And I am sure those of you in the Middle East know nothing starts on time.
So, well, we're used to that. So if you want a great tip, when I couldn't sleep, I bought the most boring book I could find, which was like the philosophy of Wagner's music. And preferably you buy it in a language which isn't your mother tongue. And so after 3 pages, you're out. I mean, you're gone. It's so boring.
I
So-
thought, Robbie, you were going to tell us you hit yourself on the head with a book and you're out like that. So we're going to do a quick introduction to everyone. Robi, Bassam, turn off your cameras for a few minutes. We'll call you back. We're just going to greet everyone, tell them to make sure they've seen this edition of the Jewish Report newspaper. So we'll be back with the both of you in about 5 minutes' time. And the time has just gone 8 p.m. A huge welcome to everyone this evening. Lovely to be back. We've taken about a week, 10 days break. And,
oh, here's my cousin.
I'm sure, but let you guys turn off your cameras and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, Bassam and Robi, if you could just turn off your cameras for a moment.
Okay, Robbie, turn off, and then we'll and I see Helen Maisel is watching us. So if you haven't seen this week's edition of the South African Jewish Report, please go have a look at it. An amazing front page story where the Chief Rabbi of South Africa and the Anglican Archbishop of South Africa are in fact having a bit of a tiff. So if you haven't seen this week's edition of the South African Jewish Report, please go pick one up at your local Spar, your Checkers, your Discam, your Pick and Pay, your CNA, your exclusive books, your shul, your school. We're all over the place. And if you don't get a chance to go out, because COVID is everywhere at the moment, so I hope you're staying at home and not actually going out. Don't forget you can read us online on www.sajr.co.za. So let me just repeat that for you, www.sajr.co.za. And can we ask Danny and Britt to turn on their cameras so we can thank them? They're on controls this evening. Danny, how's it?
Hello, Howard. And
How
this
are you?
lovely cold winter night. I'm in my PJs all snug. I'm not wearing a phyllo jersey such as yourself, Howard, but nonetheless.
Well, Danny, you do know we had 5 winners of our Fila competition last week. We're going to give away another 5 sweatshirts or hoodies tonight as well. So maybe you'll be lucky if you're a patron of the South African Jewish Report. You too can be dressed in your Fila.
Howard, I was one of the first patrons.
That is correct. Danny, thank you tonight. Britt, you're also on controls. You're moving questions of YouTube and of Facebook onto Zoom tonight as well. So huge thank you, Britt.
Thank you.
Cool. And so Danny, we were talking about the patron campaign. If you haven't become a patron of the South African Jewish Report, tonight we're actually going to give you a few reasons of why you should. Now, patron of the South African Jewish Report means you're either a donor to us, or alternatively, if you're not a donor, you've signed a debit order of 180 Rand a month to help the support the sort of work that we're doing. So please become a patron, sajr.co.za/patrons. Or we even have one, Danny, for donations, if I'm not mistaken. Do we have that slide as well? So if you don't want to sign a debit order, you can give us a donation as well. Support all of the work that we do at the South African Jewish Report. Danny, let's see a quick video about our patron campaign. So Danny, I want to explain to people why they should become a patron of the South African Jewish Report. And one of the reasons we just mentioned was last week, thanks to Fila South Africa, we gave away 5 hoodies. So we gave out vouchers for hoodies or sweatshirts, 5 of them. And our winners last week were Michael Ezra, Brad Kaftel, Ariane Hennick, Sydney Lazarus, and Lisa Klein. So you're going to get your vouchers this week as well. And we are going to give away this weekend another 5 sweatshirts to either donors or patrons of the Jewish Report. But tonight, you will remember that last week, we said to you, if you become a patron or you give us a donation, we are giving away an iDream bed. And that's this amazing bed worth $21,999. And we're going to do a draw this evening. So you'll remember this is a special bed because they go into the ocean. They take all of this plastic and junk that's busy floating around in the ocean. They combine it all together. In fact, they pay fishermen to collect all of this garbage. They recycle it and they turn it into the most comfortable bed you could ever sleep on. And we're giving away a queen size bed tonight worth $21,999. That's courtesy of Restonic. These are iDream beds. And let me tell you, you absolutely really want one of these. Danny, have you got a video to show us just quickly of the iDream bed before we give it away?
Mangivuka ekuseni ngiredi ukubeka ukudla etafuleni, ngiredi ukusebenza, ngiredi ukuhamba noma yiphi indlela. Konke kuyenzeka ngenxa yombhede, umbhede ongivumela ukuthi ngiphumule. Ngiredi for ilanga lakusasa.
So Danny, I'm going to ask you to turn on your camera quickly. And I'm going to ask you to randomly select a number between 1 and 264.
Okay. Randomly 1. I would select, let's go for number 36, 2 times Kai. I feel lucky about that one.
Number 36. Our winner of the 21,999 Rand iDream beds is Solly Zaskansky. And I see Solly, he must work at First because there's a First email address. So Solly Zaskansky, a huge mazel tov to you. We will in fact be contacting you in the week and making sure that we deliver you a 21,999 Rand bed that you've just won. And Hirsch, you're a patron of the South African Jewish Report. You're in line to win one of another 5 sweatshirts or hoodies as well. Danny, show us quickly again that patron video and then put up a poll. If someone would like us to contact them to become a patron of the South African Jewish Report, let's give them an opportunity to come into the draw because we're going to make that draw for the next 5 hoodies next week. So Danny, will you put up a poll for us on just so if you would like someone to contact you in the week to become a patron of the South African Jewish Report, please just click on yes, I'd like to become a patron, or yes, it would be an honor to be a patron, or yes, I'm already a patron. And we would love to have you on board as one of the patrons of the South African Jewish Report and really helping us deliver this amazing service, because Hirsch, tonight is the 97th webinar that we've done since lockdown began.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how, and I want to just say, you know, that it's not something to be taken for granted. You only have to look over the last year, how many print publications have fallen by the wayside, you know, publications that have the fair ladies, the garden and home food, you know, that whole genre have fallen by the wayside over the last 12 months. And here we are, the Jewish Report, a free publication that is not only bringing South African news and of our own community, but global and international news to our viewers, our readers, and our listeners. And so we're appealing to all of you to be a part of our future and to help us make sure that we can continue to bring you what's relevant and important in our community and around the world to you in all the mediums that we do.
So to all those people who've said they'd like to become a patron of the Jewish Report, huge thank you. We'll send you a link to be able to do that on Monday. And just before we begin, we have another webinar tomorrow. Now, it's unusual that we have interesting similar topics tomorrow, but tonight we're talking to bereaved families of people who've lost children in the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Tomorrow, we're trying to get behind the fog of war and actually understand the nitty-gritty details beyond the propaganda, beyond all the noise. We try to understand what really happened in the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas, Israel and the Palestinians. And so that's tomorrow night, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And in fact, we've got a very quick promo to show people of Beyond the Fog of War, which we'll be doing tomorrow evening.
القول قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم القول قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم القول قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم ما دنسوا لي حمانا لو طوقته الضراغم حثالة البغي صالت فأين عهد الحواسم ناسوا بأننا أبات نذود ذود القشاعم نحن الذين وطئنا بالخيل عرش الأعاجم بالخيل عرش الأعاجم المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم القول قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم نحن الذين بنينا حصوننا من جماجم سقنا حليلات كسرى بالسوط سوق الغنائم رسولنا من صنعنا بناة مجد أكارم رسولنا شمس حق أضاء وجه العوالم أضاء وجه العوالم الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي رسول أهل العزائم القول قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم أنار مشكاة ليل من الضلالات قاتم وصاغ من بعض قوم جيلا مع الفجر قادم فحطموا رأس باغ وذللوا كل ظالم حربا على كل حرب سلما لكل مسالم سلما لكل مسالم قول الصوارم كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي نسام رسول أهل العزائم.
So that's tomorrow night, 7 p.m. I think we've got an amazing panel trying to actually understand what happened in the conflict. And finally, just before we begin, tonight is in fact sponsored by Hold Real Estate. So if you're looking for real estate in Israel, either because you're going to go live there, or alternatively because you would like a holiday home, a second home, a place for your kids, then Hold is really our partner in attempting to help you find something that's most appropriate for you. Danny, let's quickly see a Hold ad.
Where is home? Is it the place where we're born? Is it where we see ourselves retiring? For Jews around the world, Israel, the Holy Land, will always be the place we belong. Let us find your perfect home. Because we realize that purchasing property is just the beginning of the journey, and everything that comes afterwards can be a little overwhelming. Our team will hold your hand throughout the process. Legal services, opening bank accounts, organizing mortgages, project management and post-sales management of the property, including finding tenants and managing your apartment. You can trust that with over 20 years experience and backed by the biggest development companies in Israel, our team is focused exclusively on representing the unique needs of our buyers. Anything is possible, and we will make your dream a reality. Talk to us about finding and securing your future property in Israel.
So if you would like someone from Hold to get hold of you, if you are thinking about buying a property in Israel, Hold are our partners. We would love you to be able to just answer the poll and we'll get someone from Hold to give you a shout. So Danny, do you have a Hold poll for us? There we go. So send me some free investment guide, an ebook, or you'd like to schedule a consultation, or you would like to be added to the Hold Real Estate newsletter. If you'd like to answer any of that, if you'd like some more information, then absolutely Hold are our partners there. So please feel free to follow to fill that out, and we'll get someone to follow it back. As always, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please post that into the Q&A section. If you're watching us tonight on YouTube or on Facebook, please make sure that you put a comment there as well, and we'll transfer that over to Zoom and make sure that our panelists can address any issues or any comments that you have as well. So that's the Q&A section at the bottom. Hirsch, in addition, we're going to be making an offer about Izzy if people want to watch the documentary that tonight is based on. Izzy, which is this Israeli streaming service, I know you're a subscriber, are giving us a 20% discount tonight. So Hirsch, just quickly tell us a little about Izzy.
So Izzy is the Israeli equivalent, I guess, of Netflix. They host a whole series of documentaries, of movies. Some are produced specifically for Izzy, and others are you could potentially find in other mediums. And there's some really, really interesting documentaries. In fact, earlier last year, we hosted one on behalf of Izzy with the founders of the people who invented the Iron Dome. So they're amazing documentaries and features. And one of our guests tonight, Robi Damelin, her documentary, One Day After Peace, which you can see up on the screen right now, which we're going to talk about over the next hour and a half or so, is featured on Izzy. So the discount code is there. One Day After Peace. You simply log on to Izzy and join as a member to get your 20% off. I think it's $5.99 per month, which is roughly about 70 odd rand. And you can unsubscribe at any time if you choose to, but there are really some good shows and excellent documentaries.
So Hirsch, tell us, how did we come to tonight's thing? And with that, I'm going to ask Bassam and Robi to turn on their cameras and rejoin us again.
Harry, so I was on, welcome Robi and welcome Bassam again. I was on CNN and sort of flipping through the channels, and I paused for a moment on CNN, and there was an interview with Christian Amanpour on CNN, and it turned out to be Robi and Bassam. And Robi, I have to tell you that at a first glance, I thought it might have been Judi Dench, Dame Judi Dench. I'm not sure if anyone has told you, there's a striking similarity between you and Dame Judi Dench. But I paused for a moment, and then Robi, your accent caught me. So I started watching, and it wasn't the full documentary, Howard, but it was the most riveting story of the two people who we have on our panel tonight, who have both suffered the most unthinkable tragedy in their lives, the tragedy of having to bury a child, which I think for any parent is just unthinkable and unimaginable. And the message that came from both of them, it was during this latest conflict between Israel and Hamas. The message that came out of them during this conflict was so different to what everyone was experiencing in the news, one of reconciliation, of forgiveness, and it was emotional and riveting. And so I reached out to Robi. Luckily for the global village of social media, I managed to track Robi down. It wasn't difficult, and reached out to her. And we phoned and I sent her a message, and she said she would be happy to be on the webinar. And then I asked her if she could reach out to Bassam, who I'd watched with her on CNN. And Robi reached out to Bassam, and he came back and said, he would love to appear. And so here we are, with two amazing individuals who've got an amazing story to tell, both in tragedy and in some respects in triumph of what they've overcome.
So guys, just to set the scene, we're going to play a 2-minute introduction that features Bassam and tells a little about the story of what we're going to be talking about this evening.
As you see, we are bereaved Israeli and Palestinian families, and we refuse to give up because it's not a job. It's not a job to be bereaved families or bereaved fathers. We are peace activists. We are not victims, and we refuse to live as victims.
This Palestinian terrorist is my dear brother, Bassam Aramin. In many ways, he's the closest person to me on earth. He's much closer to me than many of my own people, many of my own family. And what makes us so close is this price that we both have paid as an outcome of this ongoing conflict between our two nations. On the 4th of September 1997, the bubble that we were living in was blown up by 2 Palestinian suicide bombers who blew themselves up in Ben Yehuda Street in the center of Jerusalem, killing 5 people that day, including 3 little girls. One of these girls was my 14-year-old Smadar. It was Thursday afternoon, and the beginning of a very long night, which continues until today. At first, when you hear about the explosion, you keep hoping that maybe this time this finger will not turn towards you. Then you find yourself running in the streets trying to find her. You go from hospital to hospital, from police station to police station, many long and frustrating hours, until eventually very, very later that night you find yourself in the morgue. This finger is stuck right between your eyes, and you see this sight which you will never ever be able to forget for the rest of your life. Then you come back home, the house is filled with thousands of people coming to pay respect. These are the 7 days of the Jewish mourning period, it's called Shiv'ah. And you're kind of enveloped by these thousands of people. But on the 8th day, everybody goes back to their normal, everyday businesses. You are left alone. You need to wake up. You need to stand up and face yourself. And you have to make a decision. What are you going to do now with this new, unbearable burden on your shoulders? What are you going to do with this anger that eats you alive from within? There are only 2.
People ask me, how do you do it? How do you get yourself out of bed in the morning? Every morning. And just get out there. When it's hard, when it's hopeless, when it seems all odds are against you. Where do you get that strength to never give up? And I say, I have no choice. I have to. We have to.
Because if I,
and I,
and I,
and I,
and I, and I,
وأنا,
who lost a sister,
a brother, and uncle,
who lost his father.
أختي, the brother,
Your sons,
who lost a father to the
Who
conflict.
lost a sister to the conflict.
can walk the path of peace.
تستطيع أن تمشي في طريق السلام. יכולה ללכת בדרך השלום.
Then surely you can too.
Bereaved Israelis and Palestinians refuse to give up. Take a step with us on the path of peace. To find out more, search Taking Steps.
Robi, Bassam, welcome. It's a great privilege to have both of you this evening on our broadcast. Robi, you have a South African accent. Maybe you start by telling us where you come from, how you landed up in Israel, and tell us the story of your son, David.
Okay, I didn't know I looked like Judy Dench, but anyhow, maybe I'll dye my hair blonde. Yes, I do come from South Africa, and I was born in Johannesburg. Almost every time I give a talk, I say to people, think about the very first time that you did an act of social justice. And I remember there used to be a dairy called Giskin's Dairy, and they used to deliver milk with a horse and cart to my house. And I remember there was this huge cart horse, and this man used to beat the horse, and I was 5. And I decided with my friend Barbara that we're stealing the horse because it can't be beaten. And we went to Giskin's Dairy and we stole the horse, and we brought it home with carrots, and we put it in our tennis court. And of course, my father came home and found a horse in the tennis court. He was not thrilled. Shortly after that, I was sent to boarding school. But you see, that was an act of social justice, and that's where it started. And I never belonged to any, well, I went to boarding school, Red Hill, and afterwards to Potchefstroom Convent because I was so naughty, apparently. Can't imagine how anybody could have said that. And later on, I understood the injustice of what was happening in South Africa, but I never understood how much I could have done and should have done. And often it hits me that when I see how I dedicated my life here, I wish I had have had that same ability then, but maybe I needed to grow up. I was thrown out of Harborni. Shall I tell you all these honest stories? At the age of 13 for smoking on a Friday. I mean, I was not exactly a nice Jewish girl. And then when the 6-Day War broke out, I phoned up my father, who happened to be in London, and said, look, I'm going to Israel. And he said, oh, are you mad? You know, you'll get killed. And then I went to the South African Zionist Federation, and they said I wasn't suitable to go to Israel. And they sent me to a psychologist to see if I was really fit for living in Israel. So apparently I was. So I came to Israel in 1967, not with very much intention of staying here. I really thought what I wanted to do was to go and live in the States or in England, where most of my family lived. But things happen, and I worked for the Jerusalem Post, and I got married and had 2 children. And I brought up my children with values of compassion, of understanding. And then comes the army and Iran, my oldest son. I remember standing at the bus stop and looking and thinking, how is it possible that a child of mine will carry a gun? And David was standing next to me, and both of us were crying. And then there was a year and a month difference between them. The next year, David went as well. And this was in the Intifada, and I didn't really know exactly what they were doing. They didn't really tell me. But I know that it affected their psyche. And so when they finished the army, one went to India, like most kids here, and one to South America. It's a kind of, you call it a gap year, I call it an escape year from what you've done. And then they came back, and David, they went to university. David was studying the philosophy for his master's in the philosophy of education. And he was called to go to Miluim, to the reserves. And he came to see me and he said, I don't know what to do. because if I don't go, it was to serve in the occupied territories. And he said, and if I don't go, what will happen to my students? Because he was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army. And if I don't go, what happens to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And if I do go, I will treat people with dignity, and so will all my soldiers. You see, David was part of the peace movement and had a very open and liberal mind. And he didn't want to serve. But here is the dilemma that happens to Israeli kids who grow up here. You don't know who the person is behind the gun, I assure you. In any event, he went to Miluim and he was killed by a Palestinian sniper. And like Bassam always says, and you'll hear it from Bassam as well, one Palestinian killed my son, not the whole Palestinian nation. So apparently when the army came to tell me, one of the first things that I said is, you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. I don't know, I guess it came very much from my own background, from the way I grew up, from my own sense of values. I don't even remember saying that. And then a religious Jewish man, but I did know immediately that I wanted to do something to prevent other mothers from experiencing this pain, because losing a child is like somebody comes and tears your heart out. And every day it's there, and either you die with your child, as many people do, not physically, or you build monuments, or you decide to do something. But I wanted education because that was my child. That was the way that I could commemorate him. And I wanted to prevent other families, both Palestinian and Israeli, from experiencing this pain. I spoke at a huge rally to get out of the occupied territories, maybe 3 months after David was killed. There were 60,000 people there. And then Yitzhak Frankenthal, who was the creator of this organization, came to see me and invited me to go to a weekend with bereaved Palestinian and Israeli families in East Jerusalem. And I really wasn't very keen to do that because I thought I had enough pain. I didn't need any more bereaved people. Of course, I didn't understand then how important it was to be with others who had lost because they understood. And I went to East Jerusalem to this weekend. And I sat around the table and I looked into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers. And I realized that we shared the same pain. And that if both of us stood over a grave and a tear fell, it would be the same color. And so what is it if we can stand on the same stage, me and another woman, or me and Bassam, and talk in the same voice for nonviolence and reconciliation? Surely then that would be an example to others. And this started off, I closed my office and I started to travel all over the world with a Palestinian partner. And we spoke in the House of Lords, in the House of Commons, in the Congress, in hip-hop concerts, wherever people invited us. I could have become an air hostess. I traveled so much. And I thought I was really very important. You know, I had all this access to talk and meeting extraordinary people. And then one night when I was at home, there was another knock on my door, and I went to the door and I opened it, and there were 3 soldiers standing there. When there are 3 soldiers, only means one thing. So I slammed the door in their face and I thought, I can't lose another child. That will be the end of me. I can fix things, but this is nothing I want or ever could fix. And they kept on knocking and knocking. Eventually I opened the door and they said, we've come to tell you that we caught the man who killed David. So maybe they thought I would be delighted and with a sense of revenge, but of course that was the test. You see, you can go around the world talking about reconciliation and talking about nonviolence and reading bad poetry, rainbows, all of this kind of stuff. But do you actually really mean it? And I didn't sleep for months after that because I thought, I can't do this work. I will not be in integrity at all. And so at some point, I woke up one morning and within 10 minutes, I wrote a letter to the parents of Thaya, that's the name of the man who killed David. in which I told them about the parent circle, that we are more than 600 families, and that we believe that there has to be a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any political future peace agreement. And I told them that we should meet. I told them all about David, of course, and that we should meet because we owed that to our children and grandchildren. And of course, you can imagine how shocked they were, but they said they would give the letter to Thaya within, I expect, I'm not the most patient character in the Middle East, so I imagine that I will get a letter within days. But of course, there's no such thing as instant reconciliation, and maybe it never would happen. After 3 years, I got a letter from Thaya in which he said I was crazy and that I should stay away from his family and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But you see, I knew that when he was a very little boy, his uncle was violently killed by the Israeli army, and he saw it. And he also lost 2 uncles in the second uprising. So I think he went on a path of revenge. It wasn't even really a politically motivated murder. He became a folk hero. So when he wrote me that letter, what he actually did was he released me from being a victim. And that is such a freeing thing. I don't know how to, if you don't take anything away from you from here tonight, remember that when you are a victim of circumstances of somebody, you don't have to lose a child, but you could fight with your husband. I don't know. Whatever it is, don't remain a victim of that circumstance because it will hold you back for the rest of your life. And so I went to South Africa together with 2 filmmakers who wanted to make a film about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what they said was, would I go with them? And I said yes. And we wanted to meet victims and perpetrators who'd given evidence in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and to see where they are today. And also, I had seen June Fourie. I'm sure you've all heard of June Fourie, or maybe not, who went to give evidence. Her daughter was killed in a pub. And she went to give her story at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And she said to the people who killed her daughter, I forgive you. And I wanted to know what she meant because I too was looking for the meaning of forgiving. And when I got to her, we became sisters immediately. I also met Black mothers in South Africa. There's no difference, no bridges need to be built, nothing. And I met Jen and I said, what's your definition of forgiving? And she said, for me, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. And then I met Lachlapo, who was the man who actually sent the people to kill her daughter. And he said, by her forgiving me, she has released me from the prison of my inhumanity. Wow, that was such a powerful statement. I came back to Israel. I decided it's time to meet Thaya. And I asked for Bassam, and maybe later on you'll understand why, to be the go-between between me and Thaya. And I went to Tzipi Livni, who was then the Minister of Justice, and she said yes, and we were waiting for the police. And as you may have noticed, there are rather a lot of elections in Israel of late. And so they chose a new Minister of Justice, who actually had no intention of letting me get into any prison. So that's where it stands today. But I'm just one of 600 families. Each and every one of us could make a movie, could tell a story. And if we get the opportunity, I will tell you stories of transformation, of people that you would never imagine, people who said that after 100 years, if they met the person that killed their child, they'd kill him. So because the Palestinians in our group always say that if the Hamas will kidnap me, they'll give me back after 3 hours with 3,000 shekels, because I talk so much, I would like to give the floor to Bassam, and thank you.
Thanks, thanks so much, Robin. And I know how we've got a few snippets, but you really just giving us a broad overview. The documentary One Day After Peace is just so emotional and so meaningful. It's got such a strong connection to South Africa as well. So to all of our viewers, I really recommend that you take the time to watch the documentary. And Bassam, I know that you've also, the documentary is called Within the Eye of the Storm, and it talks about, I think the gentleman's name is Rami El-Khanan, who we saw in that snippet, who had lost his daughter, and your strong connection to him. And so if we can ask you to tell us your story and a little bit about where you come from and how you arrived at this point in your life.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Robi. Robi didn't tell you why, on which conditions they give her driving license in the South Africa, but never mind. You know, I am a Palestinian, which is very difficult to be a Palestinian living in this area, grow up as a child under the strange occupation. It means people that you don't know, you don't understand, they don't look like you, they don't understand our language, we don't understand their language, and we don't know why they come to our village to control our life. So you must be a fighter. You don't need to go to school or to educate you to fight those strangers. It's not to create a Palestinian state or the national dignity. We don't understand that. It's just to feel safe as kids. So at the age of 13, I start to be a fighter or a warrior by raising the Palestinian flag on the trees around our school, or maybe throwing stones. At the age of 16, we find some old weapons. My friends use the two-hand grenades against Israeli patrols or soldiers. No one killed, no one injured because they don't know how to use it in a professional way. At the age of 17, we have been arrested. So the first one gets 21 years in jail, 19, 15, 14, and I get 7 years. You know, it's my life experience. You learn about yourself and the other side. I learned from the beginning that if you know your enemy, you can defeat him or you can kill him. If you only hate him, you will kill yourself. So, in fact, from the beginning, I start to study Hebrew to know how to kill Robi in that time when I meet her late. Then I watch a movie about the Holocaust. I don't know how much what we know about the Holocaust as Palestinians, as Arabs, in general, as Muslims. I believe the mass majority, we don't believe in the Holocaust. We think it's never happened with 6 million, with all those details and atrocities. And those, the Israeli government or the Israeli Zionist movement, they use this big lie to justify their occupation or crimes against us. So we know it's a big lie. So I want to enjoy seeing this movie as kind of revenge to see someone torture those Jewish, kill them, arrest them, at least because I'm in their jails. In fact, after a few minutes, suddenly I found myself crying, sympathy with those innocent people. I don't expect to see such atrocities. And I say to myself, it's just a movie, nothing like this in the reality. I don't believe that there are human beings can do the same to other human beings. And I start to hide my tears from other prisoners. Then I decide that I want to understand more about this big lie. If it's really happened or it's just a movie or propaganda. In fact, after many years, in 2010, 2011, before 10 years, I make my master's degree about the Holocaust in Bradford University in the UK. It starts as a tool to know your enemy in order to know how to deal with him, how to defeat him. Then you find yourself in a different place. I believe everyone wants to protect his ignorance, his less education. Because if you know more, you act better. And when you know the truth, you start to suffer because you need to change your attitude. You need to adopt something different. In fact, everything in jail pushes you to continue to be more determined to continue your way, your armed struggle against this brutal enemy, because no one to talk to. Their goal is to kill our humanity in jail, and our goal is to survive in order to continue our mission. We are freedom fighters. We are not like them. So it's very important to justify your way in a moral path. I get released in 1992 after 7 years, and I still believe in armed struggle or violent struggle as the only way, because the Israelis or the Jews that we know is the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli police or jailers, and the Israeli settlers, which is very violent, as I remember as a child. So those are the Israelis that we know. Even we thought when we were kids that those soldiers come from outside and they leave their kids and their women's outside, so they come to kill us or to occupy our land. Then later on, they will bring their kids because we never saw like kids or women's. For us, it's a sign of civilians. In fact, 1 year after I get released, we have Oslo Agreement for the first time between PLO and Israel. And remember, PLO exactly was like Hamas today, exactly the same. Killers, criminals, they want to throw Israel to the sea. They are thirsty to drink the blood of the Jewish people. And in one day, they became partners for peace. They signed this agreement. What happened? It's a political decision in one day. That's it. And for us, like the people, suddenly we have peace. In fact, I start to think in a normal way. You can make a family, you can bring kids, you can grow up children in a normal way. And this is the biggest project was for me to get married. And this is what I did, because this is the normal thing to do if you feel peace, in spite my wife in front of me, but I hope she's sleeping now. Then I discovered that I put myself in a different jail or another jail forever. Then I start to have kids, and suddenly I have 6 kids, which is worse than the Israeli occupation. It's a lot of responsibility. And then somewhere, your kids, your wife, they become your world, your Palestine, your homeland. I want to do everything possible to protect them and not to exist under the same conditions that I go through when I was a child, which is unfortunately, it's an impossible mission if you live in Palestine and Israel. It's not in the same level, but still, there is no safe place for anyone. And sometimes if you survive, it's by chance, not because you are a wise man, which is not a normal life. In fact, after I get released, as I said, and after Oslo Agreement, after we have the Palestinian Authority in some cities here, in one moment, it's a longer process, but in one moment you said, that's it. It's the turning point. I'm not going to use or support armed struggle because it doesn't work. And remember, it's more than 100 years more. We are trying to kill each other, Palestinians and Israelis, to defeat each other. We did everything possible. And until now, Israel is not safe and Palestine is not free, but more blood, more pain, more victims. And we need to change our way because our goal is to survive, to live. We born to live and not to die. It's a very complicated process. I start to be active in my society in the Palestinian side, that we need to change our way to achieve, to be free and to establish our state and to live in peace and stability. It doesn't work to send a suicide bomber. It's not a real message of peace from the Palestinians and the Israelis. So in 2003, I heard in the Israeli media about something called refuseniks, which is ex-Israeli soldiers and officers who refuse to serve in the occupied territories or in Palestine because they want to live in a moral place, they want to live, they don't want to be part of this illegal and immoral occupation to another people. And for me, it was unbelievable. I wish to meet those people. And 2 years later, in 2005, we have the first meeting between 4 Palestinians, ex-prisoners, I was one of them, with 7 ex-Israeli officers. Rami's son was one of them. And you can imagine the first meeting between the real enemies. We did our best to kill each other physically from both sides. We know each other. We hate each other. We don't trust each other. So it was the most difficult meeting for each one of us. In fact, it takes around 1 year meetings, and each time we bring more friends and people to join. In the end of this year, we become 300 members. So we agree to make a movement. We call it Combatants for Peace. And our slogan was what Nelson Mandela says. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you need to work with your enemy, not only to talk. Then he became your partner. And this was our goal and our challenge, to create a partnership between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We start to work together to talk in each side, in the Palestine and Israel, that we are your fighters. We change our way to achieve the same thing, because we discovered that we want to kill each other to achieve the same thing. We want to live in peace and security. Of course, each one from his point of view. In fact, 2 years later, in the 16th of January 2007, an Israeli border police teenager shot and killed my 10-year-old daughter, Abir, in front of her school from a distance of 15 to 20 meters in her head from the back. She fell down, and 2 days later, she passed away in Hadassah Hospital, where she born. Abir was 10 years old. She don't know anything about the conflict. The opposite, I want my kids to meet the enemy in early age. So my 4 kids, they participate in 2 summer camps with Israeli kids to discover that not all the Israeli soldiers, as we watch in the checkpoints, there are also kids like them. And Abir wants to study Hebrew to be in touch with her friend Tal from Tel Aviv. And I remember at least 2 or 3 times I called Tal to translate between Abir and Tal. As Robi mentioned, the most easy thing is to think about revenge. It's very easy, but you will never be unique. And even in the Combatants for Peace, we decide to break this circle by stop killing and stop support killing by ourselves. I wish in the same day that Abir will be the last victim between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. 2 days later, I joined the parent circle because I know my brother Rami 2 years before I lost my daughter. I know Robi from the Palestinian media sometimes. So I know this noble organization, but in my worst dream, I don't want to join this amazing group because the ticket is very high. You need to know that it's ongoing pain forever. You will never heal 24 hours. So you need to know how to deal with this pain, how to direct it, how to live beside it. In fact, I met the victim who killed my daughter after 3.5 years in the Israeli court. I call him a victim because to kill 10 years innocent girl without even regret, absolutely you are a victim to yourself, to your education, to your history, I don't know. And I say a victim because not the killer of my daughter is an Israeli Jew, because he killed 10 years innocent girl. I don't care who killed her. It's forbidden to kill kids under any circumstances because they are kids, the most innocent people in everywhere, not only in Palestine and Israel. And I remember once 3 kids have been killed in a settlement 10 years ago. And I wrote a letter, I was in London, I wrote a letter to the family to say, not in my name. So when I met him, I told him that you need to know that you are not a hero, you are not a warrior, you didn't kill the enemy or the terrorist, you just killed 10 years innocent girl. And if you think it's okay to kill my daughter, enjoy your crime. I don't ask for revenge because I don't take revenge from victims. For me, you are not less victim than your victim. But in any day, if you come to ask me to forgive you, I will forgive you. It's not because of you, it's because of myself. Because I really love my daughter very much. And because I have another 5 kids. I don't want them to grow up as victims. They deserve to grow up in a different way. So in the parent circle, we are more than 620 families. We try to spread a very simple message that our lives, our kids' life is more important than any holy land. In one condition, we said we want to prove that we can be partners at least. You know, we can live in peace without loving each other, without hugging each other, without eating hummus together, but we need to respect each other. This is the first condition. We both have the right to exist. No one have the right to occupy another one, because as long as the occupation continue, the Israeli occupation, we will continue to sacrifice the blood of our kids. Don't believe any other solution. I believe that the Israelis will never give up their safe place after 3,000 years of slavery and discrimination and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And believe me, the Palestinians, after 3,000 years from tonight, they will never, ever accept the Israeli occupation or the Israeli control. We need to be
Bassam,
free.
I wanted to just stop because Howie, I'm going to ask you, sorry, Bassam, we'll come back to that. Just talk a little bit about your story. You've done your master's in international conflict resolution, but Robi, I wanted to just read something to you. I invited my cousins who live in Israel, first cousins, just to come onto the webinar, and she sent me this WhatsApp which read, Shavua Tov, thanks for thinking of us, but Shabbat has just finished. And the topic for us is too close to home. We hear similar stories almost daily. Howard, who is her husband, actually finished reserve duty at the same military outpost where David Damelin was killed. David's unit replaced Howard's, and David was killed a few days after. Howard was convinced that he wouldn't come out of reserve duty alive, as it was a perfect place for an ambush. And that's exactly what happened to the 11 soldiers that were killed there.
Yeah, Hirsch, you mentioned it. Sorry.
I'm going to just say, I know you've done your master. I'm feeling I've just got sort of goosebumps just reading that WhatsApp, so close to home, and so but you've done your masters in international conflict resolution, and I know part of that was a negotiation process with Palestinians and Israelis, and you've got a story to tell.
Yeah, so I was a student of someone called Herb Kalman, who was probably the most renowned negotiator prior to Oslo, helping to negotiate between Israelis and Palestinians. And as part of his course, we spent an entire semester negotiating between Israelis and Palestinians and trying to find common ground between them as facilitators. One of the very interesting things in this conflict, in every conflict, is something called mirror imaging in conflict. Both sides see themselves as the victim. And in truth, they are both victims and perpetrators, and both sides are both the victims and the perpetrators, yet they only perceive themselves as the victim. And what you have to do is to almost break through in order that people perceive and understand each other from the other perspective. And if you can see how your enemy perceives yourself, then you can actually talk through. And there's the most beautiful story. So we're in the middle of a negotiation, and one of the Palestinians was a woman called Layla. She was the daughter of a Jordanian cabinet minister, a Palestinian. And we're sitting eating lunch, and Layla is next to me, and she says to me, "You're South African?" And I say, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, I want to tell you a story." She says, "I was here doing my master's in law at Harvard, and there was a guy in my class, a South African called Anthony Gordon." And of course I knew Anthony Gordon. He was at King David a year ahead of me. Everyone knew Anthony Gordon. He was the funniest person around. At Wits, he basically ran Wits. He ran RAG. And she said, well, Anthony Gordon was at Harvard with her. And she said, if Harvard had a head boy, it would have been Anthony Gordon. He knew everyone. He joked with everyone. She said, but even though he was in my class, he never once spoke to me. And she said, I knew that he was South African, so he was probably a racist. She said, I knew he was Jewish and I was a Palestinian, so he probably hated me because I was a Palestinian. She said, but it irked me the entire year that Anthony never ever once spoke to me. And she said one day she was sitting in Hark, the law school canteen at Harvard, and Anthony Gordon walked in and made a beeline directly for her table. And she looked up and he said, you know, you look so much like my ex-girlfriend. I've been unable to even look at you the entire year. And she said in that very one moment, she understood that all of these preconceptions that she had built up and this understanding she had built up, all of it meant nothing when people actually sit down and talk to each other. And towards the end of the semester, like everyone in the class, having negotiated or facilitated the negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians, and we asked the two teams, do you think if you had enough time, you'd be able to sort out a deal? And every single person in that negotiation said yes. And I think we all have to look at our own stories and our country stories. Robi, you spoke about the fact that you came to South Africa to look at the TRC. And before we go on and talk about revenge or forgiveness, I want to show just a very little clip. It was from one of the earliest days of the TRC. And it's a story of the PEPCO 4 and how closure is just so important and what it means in order to achieve that degree of closure.
The Cradock 4. Matthew Goniwe, Fort Kalata, Sparrow Mkonto and Sicelo Mtlauli were the leaders of the Cradock Ratepayers Association, like PEPCO, an affiliate of the UDF and therefore targets of the state.
On July the 4th, 1985, Mr. Louis Nel, the then Minister of Information, rejected allegations that the authorities were responsible and blamed the murders on an internecine power struggle between opposing radical organizations.
The first inquest came up with nothing. And then the newspaper New Nation published a top-secret message from military intelligence. It called for the permanent removal from society of Matthew Goniwe, Fort Kalata, and others. The signal was sanctioned by the then head of military intelligence, General Joffel van der Westhuizen. Mr. Justice Neville Zitzman found that the Cradock 4 had been killed by unidentified members of the security forces.
They chopped off his right hand. We buried him without his right hand. We don't know what they did with it.
Okay.
We want that hand. Yes, we buried him. We heard that it is at the Lekranche police station.
At the Louis Lekranche police station, I was shown a bottle with a watery substance which had a hand. And I remember that Sicelo was buried without a hand.
So forgiveness for some people is the return of a hand that they can bury. But if I can ask both Bassam and Robi, in South Africa, we chose not to pursue justice. We went through a TRC process. You didn't even have to express remorse. You just needed to come and confess your crimes before the TRC. There's still many wounds that exist. What do you think of that, Robi? And then we'll go to Bassam and ask him on this, the need for justice. Is there a need for justice still, or is it enough to actually move on and go for something bigger, grander? Let's unmute you.
I have to interrupt you at this point because I think you interrupted Bassam, Herschel. when he was in the middle of telling something and he feels not comfortable with that. And I hope he hasn't left. But it's very important that you're here, but I think it's also a very important lesson for everybody on this webinar, that you have to learn to listen with empathy, even if there's something that you want to say. And this is the way that he feels, and I would really like you to talk to Bassam about that, because that is more important than forgiving and all of this stuff, because that's what happens.
So, Bassam, my apologies. Sorry, I just know that you're under a bit of time pressure. So my apologies, and we've got lots of questions to get through. So absolute apologies for not.
No, I think this is the lecture number 10,000, and no one interrupt us like this at all. I am in the middle of my story. I am talking about my daughter's blood. If you don't want to hear it, don't call me, please.
My apologies, Bassam.
I know, I am talking from my heart. And I want you to know, I start my speech by saying everyone wants to protect his ignorance, because when you know, it's very difficult for you. As when I discovered the humanity and the nobility of some ex-Israeli soldiers, for me, they were killers and criminals. They become my family because I discovered their humanity. What's the meaning if there is a need for justice? Of course. We have people who are under the Israeli occupation for 70 years, for 50 years, for 40 years. We don't care. We said the occupation has no age. The occupation or the conflict have a mihir, a price. And the price, it's our kids, our lives. Justice, Israelis have the right to live in security, of course. And the Palestinians have the right to live free. I said it very clear, as long as the occupation continue, it's not going to help you to say we are here 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. You know, I say what? The Palestinian problem started in the 23rd of June, 1968. When I born, I am here. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to disappear, exactly like the Israelis. We will remain, and the occupation will go. Martin Luther King says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Don't keep silence. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, support your brother, right or wrong. So they ask him, how come to support him wrong? He says, by telling him the truth. I support you in South Africa, because when I discover my humanity, we are very similar. I said every Israeli is benefit from the Israeli occupation, even if he refuses, if he's against, exactly like the apartheid regime. And you are the Jewish people in South Africa. I'm very proud of you. You give a very good example for the Judaism, for the Jewish values, to support the injustice, to support the justice against injustice. When it's come to Israel, it's a different issue. No, for me, the killer is killer. Occupation is occupation. Freedom is a freedom everywhere, not for the Israelis and not for the Palestinians. I remember in 2008, we have a big delegation from South Africa, white and black, responsible in the state. They come to visit us 10 days. I was with them in the Holocaust Museum in Yad Vashem, in Nablus, with Israelis, and their evaluation the last day was like this. It's a free occupation. It's more than apartheid. It's not to compare. You need to understand the story here, why we are fighting. And to make it a war between Hamas and Israel, it's not true at all, my friend. It's not like this. It's a conflict between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. Hamas is a political organization, use violence, exactly like Fatah, where I belong, like the Popular Front, like the other parties. So we are talking as people. Our pain, me and Robi, it's the same as parents. So because we love our kids, because we love Israel and Palestine, we don't want to sacrifice the blood of our kids again to protect the holy stones of Jerusalem, to protect the holy crazy settlers who want to occupy a new house in Jerusalem, which is the source of 270 people have been killed in Gaza and 11 or 12 people in Israel. The biggest support you can support us as outside people is to be educated, to know who occupied who. We are against all the violence from both sides, but we are not similar. We are under the occupation. They occupied us. Support our voice and not to hide the truth because it doesn't work. It's remained there. So we decide, me and Robi and Rami and thousands of Israelis and Palestinians, to say the truth. This is what happened. And for that, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission succeed because we told the truth. Otherwise, we will remain enemies, and it's very easy to revive this conflict in any moment. Imagine after 73 years in Israel, the Palestinian, Israeli in Israel, in one moment, suddenly we see uprising. This is only a result, my friend. It's not what happened, it's a result, because it's an official, clear policy, discrimination against them. They are second-class citizens, they know that. And the Prime Minister announced that. It's not a secret. Maybe it's for you, but not for them, not for the Israelis, and not for us. We need to start. This is what happened in 1948. This is what happened, full stop. Yes, it was atrocities. 500 Palestinian cities, 750 Palestinians have been kicked from their land. Let us look forward to talk about the future. Always I said, the Israelis find their own Israelis, unfortunately. I hope that the Palestinians will never find their own Palestinians, to break this circle and to look forward for our kids, for ourselves. This is the truth. We say that peace make between courage or brave enemies. Only like that, not by hiding. I am not here to win over Robi or Robi to win over me. We support each other. We complete each other in order to give you another example that we learn from you. After decades of apartheid, why we consider Mandela the hero? Not because he decided to kill 5 million white people, no. Because he have this power and he chose reconciliation. He chose a humanity. For that, we deal with him as an example, as a hero. Mandela, the same thing. Martin Luther King as the same thing. We don't celebrate Hitler, for example, who killed millions. In the end, he shot himself as a suicide in a very shame way. We don't mention him. We mention him as a bad example. So your support, your voice to Israel, don't support the Palestinians, to tell them it's not Jewish thing to occupy millions of people for so many years. Remember your history. The history repeats itself. We want to stop this circle, and I will tell you something that Israel and the Israelis and the Palestinians, they forget to die, and they will remain. All these atrocities, the violence, the hatred, the darkness will end. But how much blood we need to sacrifice from the blood of our kids to arrive to the same agreement? It's the same agreement. They will go back to two-state solution, less or more. But why we didn't make it now?
Okay, so Bassam, if I may, and I'm too nervous to interrupt now, but this isn't a monologue, this is a dialogue, and we're trying to get through a lot of information, and I know you were the one who said that you could only give us 90 minutes of time. So your story is important, but we want to focus very much the issue because revenge is a right, forgiveness is a choice, and we saw that clip about the TRC, and it seems unnatural and unusual because I think so many people watching and hearing either Robi's story or Bassam's story, the natural reaction is not necessarily reconciliation. Right. And in South Africa, even as well, there are many of us who feel uncomfortable with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that people like P.W. Botha didn't go to jail, that they came, they confessed, and they didn't go on. So I would like to know from both of you, within your circles, within your family, are your families supportive of your choices here? Or is there still, for many of them, is there a tension between you of the way you've actually approached? And maybe we can start that with Robi.
I'm considered a very bad grandmother because I don't see enough of my grandchildren, but I do bring sweets because I travel such a lot and goodies. But I wanted to say something, and it was such an interesting moment now to listen how everybody climbs on the bandwagon to attack Herschel, who actually didn't mean at all to interrupt Bassam. But this is how misunderstandings happen. And this is what's called, it's like such an interesting way to work with each other, Palestinian and Israeli, and to try to understand the culture of respect. Even if you want to get through a whole bunch of stuff, Howard, it's much more important, the lesson that we should learn from tonight. It's much more important to see that everybody's quickly climbing on the bandwagon to tell how they feel sorry that this happened and blah, blah. But instead of that, let's all support each other to find some way to live together. I can tell you that this last war for me is very terrifying, because what actually happened, and you want to talk about forgiving, but I want to talk about the war, because that's a part of what is going on. And when I look at the repeat of 2014, but with better weapons now, more sophisticated weapons, and the result of nothing happening, except all these children who died, and all these children who are growing up in Gaza, and I think about what are they going to be like when they grow up, because they have no hope and they're going to be filled with hatred. And how are we ever going to handle that? And how are we going to handle the children that live in Sderot and Ashkelon and Ashdod? These are much more important questions, because these children are traumatized. They're wetting their beds at the age of 12. So, we can sit here the whole night and talk about that. And I can tell you that I was talking to Bassam on the first night of the war on the phone. And he says to me, Robi, I think I can hear sirens. You better go into the safe room. And then, I just think about the Palestinian women in Gaza and their children who have no shelters to run to. And I think about the women in Sderot and Ashkelon and Ashdod, and they only have 15 seconds, and maybe they have more than one child. It is such a complicated situation now. I think there were lots of lessons to be learned from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but I also think that forgiving is a very personal thing. And I think what they did actually was interesting, to talk to the Black mothers in South Africa who'd been to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because what they said is, we're so happy we didn't have to forgive that the government, and nobody forgave in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It wasn't a prerequisite there at all. And it was called truth because I wanted to find out what happened to all of these kids that disappeared. And looking at Flock, the most hated man in South Africa. I remember I came to Johannesburg for the preview.
That's Adrian Flock, the former Minister of Police.
He's in the film, and he was one of the most hated men in South Africa. And I remember I came to the premiere of One Day After Peace in Johannesburg, and I see Flock walking in with one of the mothers that he brings food to, and they sit down at the table and they have coffee together. And I think to myself, Jesus, this is a miracle. Whoever would have dreamed that Adrian Flock would sit with a Black woman around a table. So that's not about forgiving. She's never going to forget her son. I'm never going to forget David. What do you mean when you say you forgive? And that's what all this audience should ask themselves. It's not something that you can give a definition of. It's something unbelievably personal. For me, it is very much giving up my right to revenge. It is very much understanding why. That's the point. Because when you understand, and I believe so strongly in restorative justice, and you want to ask questions, and I'm not going to let you, because I want us to finish this conversation in love and not with any anger from anybody who listened or made comments. Because people say things that they don't actually. You were so unaware that this was going to happen, Herschel. I know that. And I sense your empathy, and I sense the fact that Bassam came back is so important for me, because this is what we have to do. This is how we have to treat each other, with that kind of respect and love. And thank you. Thank you, firstly, for inviting us to the webinar. And it may not be exactly what you imagined, but I'm really delighted that we had this opportunity, because you saw something happening in real life, in real time.
Robi, I didn't leave.
Yeah, but I thought you might.
No, I stay. But to answer the question from my point of view, it's really a very sensitive and personal issue. I said clearly, if the killer of my daughter come to ask me to forgive him, I will take my revenge without any mercy. It means I will forgive him without any mercy. And think, all of you, about this sentence. Forgiveness is more tasty than revenge, which is very difficult. But this is the truth. Even you will be more healthy physically. In spite, it's very difficult. And in the first place, you need to forgive yourself, that I cannot make much better to avoid this tragedy. The tragedy will visit you once or twice in your life, but how often you will visit this tragedy? It means the memory. And the memory, when we talk about the memory, this is the illness, the missing the people that we love. It's an open wound forever. For my family, yes, they are big supporter for me, not from the beginning, of course. My wife, for example, she don't want to forgive him. She wants to see him in jail to be punished. For me, just to understand that I killed 10 years innocent girl, to regret, this is my revenge. Even if he go to jail forever, even if he get killed, what I'm going to gain from this? Nothing at all. I want him to understand that he committed to something wrong, to a crime. For that, I ask him to punish himself. Now, in general, forgiveness, it's a very deep value in Islam, which is I belong as a Muslim. But when you think about it, I am not Jesus, I am not Muhammad, I am not Abraham Avinu to forgive. In fact, they teach us as human beings that we can forgive our enemies. So also we can forgive. It's a very personal thing, but this is what I want to teach my fellow Palestinians and human beings when I say we can use our pain in a different way. I will be delighted to be the first Palestinian to say to the killer of his daughter, go, you are free.
Yeah, but just to listen to that is a remarkable statement, I think, about the sort of person that you are. Robi, you mentioned the killers from something called the Heidelberg attack, where the Appler, and it's featured in the documentary, where Appler attacks a tavern and 4 people get killed. And you quoted from it. If you don't mind, I'm just going to play a 2-minute extract of that, because I think this freeing of the perpetrator is such a fascinating story to actually talk about.
Over the past week, the Truth Commission process dealt with the 1993 Appler attack on a small pub in Cape Town. The Truth Commission heard the application for amnesty of 3 members of the Azanian People's Liberation Army, APLA, who killed 4 people in the attack on the Heidelberg Tavern in Cape Town a day before New Year's Eve in 1993, a year before the democratic elections.
Ndangena ngaphakathi netavern. Nje ndangena ngadubula yonke imagazini.
When you entered the tavern, did it not occur to you that they were not members of the security forces?
Oqala mina I obey order and I defy order and I phikisa order because yayi order but ndangixelela ukuthi chaze sifike sidubule kuba kwabantu.
Forgiveness is a process in which you take a principled decision to give up your justifiable right to revenge. I want to tell you who Lindy was. Lindy was a true child of Africa. Lindy could have been your friend. You did your own cause immeasurable harm by killing her. On that day, you ripped my heart out.
Did you have any feeling at all at the time of sadness or anything like that innocent people had died?
From the historical point where I was standing, I felt that it was a necessary thing to do. And therefore, I cannot pretend that I had feelings because I could have saved their lives by simply cancelling the order.
Initially, I was really angry. And as I said at Leclerc's homecoming ceremony, if I'd met him in the first few months or year, I probably would have at least tried to strangle him with my bare hands. For me, what was so incredibly moving was that you were willing to take responsibility, not just one-to-one, but in public, to take responsibility for the orders that you had given. So that was, I think, what persuaded me that you were a man of real integrity. Because I had pictured this severe, evil person, and I wasn't hearing that at all.
And is that something you wanted to hear then?
No, not at all. It would have been much easier to have a devil with horns and a tail than to be impressed with the integrity of the person who's killed your daughter. Well, who's been responsible for the order. And it's difficult to explain. And so it was easy to forgive him.
Because of your forgiveness, I was released from prison of inhumanity.
Robi, in the documentary, there's this time where the person who shot David actually says, okay, you can come see me. I kind of almost grant you permission to do it. And your reaction to that is very interesting. Can you talk us through that?
You really find some odd parts of what that film was all about. But I'm very glad that you put Leclerc's reaction, because that's terribly important. Because I've gone through all of this, you know, nothing is simple. There are all these tests. When he said, okay, now he's willing to meet with me, I thought, oh, what a chutzpah. I mean, he killed my son. What do you mean? I said it in more, not less delicate words in the film. But the fact is that I started this whole thing. He didn't know what reconciliation or what I wanted. So you have, I think today, for me personally, what is terribly important is restorative justice. I am becoming more and more and more involved in this because I think it's the only way that we can find to work. And I wanted to just say, I don't know how much time we have, but there's just one thing that I wanted to say, and that thousands and thousands of people now are going to be bereaved from Corona. And thousands of people didn't have a chance to say goodbye. And not having a chance to say goodbye to the person you lost is the most terrible thing. And I don't usually give advice for bereavement because everybody's individual, but I can only tell you for myself, writing letters to David has been one of the most important things to bring solace to the loss. And if I can help somebody or support them to write a letter to the person they lost within this whole Corona mess, there's going to be so much trauma when we come out of this. And so many bereaved families that never had a chance for anybody to even sit Shiva or to watch a funeral on Zoom or not to go to church or have your priest come and console you. Think about all of that. I know it's not exactly the subject, but I think it's terribly important that we as human beings will take responsibility for this. I really do think that.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, I think you said you had a time limit. I'm not sure if you've got another minute or so. I'm not sure if you have, but I just wanted to just read a quote. We saw you standing with Rami Elchanan in that earlier snippet at the beginning of the documentary. And I think I read a story where he came to visit you at your daughter's bedside, and you said to him, "This is not you or the Jewish nation who killed my daughter. In the end, it's the system." Do you dream about, do you see this as something that could change the system and change, as you've said, the way Israelis and Palestinians see each other one step at a time?
You know, my answer is very simple, and it's built on a true. It's not a matter of hope, it's a faith. Because always I said, the Palestinians didn't kill 6 million Israelis, and the Israelis didn't kill 6 million Palestinians. And there is a German ambassador in Tel Aviv, and there is an Israeli ambassador in Berlin. It means we can do it. We need just a brave leader who take us forward to the future. The Holocaust is over, the Nakba is over. We need to look forward. We need to have the courage. And we prove that we're really a very strong nations, that we can look forward to join our efforts and to understand that we need to share this land as one state or 2 states or 5 states. Otherwise, we will share the same land as 2 big graves to our kids, our families, and our people. Again, we born to live and not we born to die. Of course, when I look to the future, I am sure we will have peace. We will enjoy peace, I hope, in our lifetime. So it's true, but how much blood again we need until to change this attitude, to understand that nothing worth our lives. Because when you die, you have no effect. That's it.
Bassam, can I ask you, you built a garden in memory of your daughter. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, this garden, I think a group organization from the States called the Rebuilding Alliance, called one of my Israeli friends. They want to donate something to me, to the family, when they heard in the news. So I said, I wish to make something for the kids in their school. So we agreed to make Abir's garden, the first one, and the condition that Israelis and the Palestinians to build it together in the local community in Palestine. I want to give an example that maybe one Israeli soldier, as Robi mentioned, killed my daughter, but more than 100 ex-Israeli soldiers and officers built Abir's garden in her memory in Anata, where she killed, and how the local community come to support us and to to help us when we build it. Then we make like 4 or 3 gardens in different places for the kids. And it's like for Abir's memory, again, Israelis and Palestinians, and especially ex-Israeli soldiers, to show one can kill, but 100 can build or support. We prove it's not an imagination. When I talk to you about combatants for peace, they are the same soldiers that we did our best to kill each other. It's possible because we are here, we are together. Me and Robi, we are together, we are family, not friends, not brothers, and we are family. So this is the change. And we prove that when we work together as partners. Of course, the personal relationship, we are human beings. You need to trust your partner, and we become friends and brothers, and we prove that we can live in one state. We can live in 2 states. We will protect each other as neighbors, but never as enemies. So this is what I try to say in a very simple way. You have the right to exist. I have the right to exist. Respect my rights. I will respect your rights, and this is the only way we can move forward. Otherwise, it's just justify your side. I will justify my side. We are here 10,000 years. You are here 3,000 years. It's the promised land. It's the Islamic land. It's Eretz Israel. It's Palestine, and we are dying.
So can I ask if we can play one more short clip from the TRC? It's probably the most, for me, compelling moment of the TRC. And then we're going to come back and ask Robi and Bassam one last question. And the question that I'm going to pose to you when you come back is, Robi, you have a new government, I think, being sworn in tomorrow. Bassam, I'm not quite sure how between the splits within this Palestinian faction, who's the right person to talk to. But if we come back and say to Robi, if you had the ear of the new prime minister, what would you tell him? And Bassam, similarly in the same side, if you had the ear of whether it's Fatah or Hamas, what would you tell them? And we're going to just come back and ask that last final question after looking at probably my favorite moment of the entire TRC.
The drama that led to the death of Stompie Sepe started in late 1988 with the accusation that Methodist minister Paul Verheyen was sexually abusing 4 young people who were running from the police. Katiza Kebekulu said Madikizela Mandela told him to claim that Verheyen had raped him. Katiza Kebekulu says he saw Madikizela Mandela stab Stompie with a shiny object one night. But Jerry Richardson had a different version. He said Mummy had ordered him to get rid of Stompie.
I did the same with him. I slaughtered him. I slaughtered him like a goat.
I speak to you as someone who loves you very deeply, who loves your family very, very deeply. I would have said to you, let us have a public meeting. And at that public meeting, for you to stand up and say, there are things that went wrong. There are things that went wrong, and I don't know why they went wrong. There are people out there who want to embrace you. I still embrace you because I love you. And I love you very deeply. There are many out there who would have wanted to do so. If you were able to bring yourself to say something went wrong, because all these leaders couldn't have been so agitated and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my part in what went wrong. And I believe we are an incredible people. Many would have rushed out in their eagerness to forgive and to embrace you. I beg you, I beg you, I beg you, please. I have not made any particular finding from what has happened here. I speak as someone who has lived in this community. You are a great person. And you don't know how your greatness would be enhanced if you were to say, sorry, things went wrong, forgive me. I beg you.
I am saying it is true. Things went horribly wrong. I fully agree with that. And for that part of those painful years when things went horribly wrong and we were aware of the fact that there were factors that led to that, for that, I am deeply sorry.
Robi, so if you have the ear of your new prime minister tomorrow, what do you tell them?
Say, you jump from one extraordinary thing to the other, because for me, the whole thing about saying sorry is such a powerful way of making emotional breakthrough to other people. And it's just an incredible speech that he made. There were lots of things that were a problem about forcing people to forgive, because that's immoral. But this whole thing of saying sorry, I've seen it within the parent circle, how powerful that all is. If I had the ear of Bennett, which is highly unlikely, I would ask him to please give up the seat to Merav Michaeli. How's that?
Other than that, is there a message though that you would?
There's a message. The message is, the message is, look for the future of Israel without your ego, and let's see if we can't find a way for both nations to live together in peace. That for me is the most important part of my life. And the problem is that it's very unlikely, and the parent circle is not affiliated to any political party, and anybody that deals with peace is already a political person. But I can say one thing, that if we don't deal with the problems ahead of us with Palestine, one of these days there will not be an Israeli state.
Bassam, if you
and
were to...
wait, and I want to make another statement, and that is that I love Israel. More than any of you, I've paid the highest price to say what I say. But it is terribly important to live in a moral country. And I think that the occupation is killing the moral fiber of Israel. And I think another thing too is that don't take sides. Please do not be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, because what you do is import our conflict into your country and create hatred between Muslims and Jews, even if you don't intend to. So be a part of the solution. Take the stories of Bassam and Robi to show that there are other voices that come out of this place. Thank you so much, Howard and Herschel. I'm sorry, I don't always answer the way you want.
That's okay. That's why we have dialogue. You know, it's very easy, and I'm going to say this not to defend Herschel, but it's very easy for you to sit outside as an audience member, and Herschel, in good faith, try to keep the conversation going, not rudely and not inappropriately, but I appreciate Bassam needs to tell his story. but some of the vitriol that comes in from people pontificating on the side is just unacceptable behavior. It's very easy to be in the audience. It's much harder to be on the panel and be in Robi's position or be in Bassam's position or be in Herschel's position. And, you know, we all try our best, and these are difficult conversations. These are very difficult conversations. And we as a Jewish community have never had these conversations in South Africa before, but we thought it was important to bring diverse views and to bring people like Robi and Bassam onto this panel in order to give them a platform. Because what we've seen over the last few weeks is hatred, propaganda, misinformation, but we haven't seen people trying to solve the problem. And what we're trying to do tonight is to conscientize people to say there's a problem that we have to actually resolve here, and you guys are part of the solution. So Bassam, I turn to you now for our final words. If you had the ear of the Palestinian leadership, what would you be telling them?
Two things. First one, I will ask them to arrest Robi, so we need to teach her Arabic. Our jails, as I learned Hebrew in the Israeli jails. And number two, which is serious now, I say to my grandchildren, I have 3 grandchildren, I will do my best to achieve peace so you can live in peace your life. Maybe I succeed, maybe I not, but I will continue to try to achieve peace as long as I live. Always we try to judge our leaders when they fail in the battle. But in one day, we need to judge them because they didn't succeed to make peace. I will ask him to make peace with all his efforts. And this is what I'm going to ask him.
I think ultimately that is the greatest blessing and bracha. What's the Islamic word for bracha?
Bracha.
Ibrahim, bracha, mubarakah.
Mubarakah. Well, I think maybe that's the greatest bracha and mubarakah that we can give to everyone. So Hirsch, do you want to thank everyone? I feel like you were pummeled unnecessarily unfairly by a few people tonight. But I think Bassam knows that you had absolutely the best intentions, and there was no animosity, there was no attempt to silence him in any way whatsoever.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, Howie, I think, unfortunately, I think as Robi and Bassam have said, some of the greatest learnings come from the most difficult times, and on any way to compare that, but listening is what we need to do more of to solve this conflict and so many others. So Bassam, I can only apologize for my insensitivity, and to all of our listeners, it wasn't there to offend, and to thank you. So Robi and Bassam, I reached out to you as strangers from a CNN broadcast, and I was as riveted tonight as I was watching that CNN interview. And I wish you peace. I wish you good health to your families, and may your message of peace and reconciliation and forgiveness extend beyond just the families who have suffered the unspeakable tragedy of losing a child that both of you have. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Bassam, if people want to watch the documentary about you or the movie that you're involved in, where do they find it? And Robi, I'm going to give the details of where people can see One Day After Peace as well. Bassam, should people Google it? Should they go on YouTube? Where can they see more?
Yeah, I think they can go to YouTube. It's called Within the Eye of the Storm. They can use YouTube. They will find it.
Okay, Within the Eye of the Storm. And Robi, if people want to see One Day After Peace, it's streaming on Izzy, is that correct?
I think so. Somebody mentioned in the chat about the book Abir, which is written about Bassam and Rami by Colin McCann. It's the most beautiful book that I've read. It's a novel, actually, but it's based on the story of Bassam and Rami. And actually, Steven Spielberg bought the rights to the film, to the book. So we're very happy about that because that will spread the message much more. I presume it's available in South Africa. Otherwise, you can order it through Amazon. It's called Abir, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book.
I'm going to ask everyone still watching just to leave a message for both Bassam and for Robi into the chat section. We'll see you again tomorrow night when we're going to delve more deeply into the conflict and try to learn a little more about what's going on and hopefully get some inkling of what we do in order to achieve peace. Robi, you keep on saying I chose the strangest parts out of the documentary, but there's one part that really touched me, and that is this moral dilemma of when Gilad Shalit may or may not be released, and whether the killer of David would be part of the prisoners released in order to do it. So as people leave us with a message, we're just going to play out with kind of an extract of what happened at that time, because I think these moral dilemmas are so difficult, and it really tests this idea of forgiveness and this idea of reconciliation when we're faced head on with these difficult decisions in life. So thank you to everyone who's watched us this evening. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
שלום לכם וערב טוב. שרי הממשלה מוזעקים בשעה זו לישיבה דחופה שלא מן המניין בנושא העסקה לשחרור גלעד שליט. חמאס מאשרים ששליט ישוחרר תמורת 1,000 אסירים. הזרוע הצבאית מדברת על כך שהתהליך הזה אמור להתבצע בימים הקרובים.
חמאס הגישה למדינת ישראל רשימה של 450 אסירים, בהם הגרועים שברוצחים שבבתי הכלא.
I wonder if you know that I appeared on TV when I heard that you are on the list to be freed. I said that you should be free if it will bring back Gilad Shalit.
כל 600 המשפחות החברות בפורום, יחד איתי, אומרות אמירה מאוד חד משמעית. שחררו את רוצחי יקירינו בעד גלעד שליט. אנחנו מוכנים לשחרר, אנחנו מאמינים שהחיים חזקים יותר מכל דבר אחר. לא נקמה, לא כעס, לא שנאה, שום דבר לא יקדם אותנו.
היחידה שלי שיכולים לשחרר אותו עם גלעד שליט.
Well, that's okay.
אוקיי, מבחינתך זה לא ממש בסדר מבחינתי. עם כל הכבוד למשפחת שליט, יש לי קצת בעיה עם זה.
Gilad Shalit, Corporal Gilad Shalit. We had some family members of his here about a month ago. He's the Israeli who was captured, kidnapped, what word are you going to use, and taken to Gaza. It seems after so many years, 5 years or so, he's going to be released, exchanged for about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners held by the Israelis.
Gilad Shalit חזר הביתה. גלעד שליט שב לארצו, למולדתו ולמשפחתו.
בעזה מתכוננים באצטדיון הגדול, כמובן אלפים מחכים שם, אנשי זדין אל-קסאם הם הכוכבים, הם אלו שהביאו את הבשורה ואת האישה ברצועת עזה.
It is agonizing in and of itself to see the release of hundreds of convicted terrorists, including those who have murdered civilians. But at the end of the day, you know, Israel's a democracy like Canada, and democracies have to make tough decisions.
Some of the people released, so one of them was, no, we're not talking about propaganda or armed resistance. One of the people released, this is about a year ago, was someone who went into an Israeli home near the coast. He took the father and a child down to the beach at gunpoint. The father was bound. I mean, literally smashed the brains of the child out on a rock. He smashed the head as the brains came out. The father was bound, trying to resist, and then shot the father dead. Added tragedy is the mother was hiding a baby in the house at the time, and the baby suffocated. This monstrous little psychopath was set free.
An eye for an eye, revenge, just starts out a spiral, and well, you see it in your part of the world, a suicide bomber comes from the Palestinian side, and you go and you hit as hard as you can, but you know that somewhere in the future, another suicide bomber is going to come. The TRC was based on the premise, the principle that it is possible for people to change. Otherwise, there was no point in having it. It'll happen. It's going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.